Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the fog-soaked alleyways of Victorian London, where gaslights flicker, footsteps echo, and the only thing louder than a restless spirit is a constable's boots splashing through puddles. You're bundled in a wool coat that's 3 layers too thick, your breath forming ghostly clouds in the damp air, and if you squint just right, you can almost imagine something, or someone, watching from a second-story window. Probably a pigeon, or a ghost. Or a pigeon ghost. Who's to say? You've decided, for reasons known only to your overtired curiosity, to accompany one of London's lesser-known ghost investigators on an all-night patrol. His name is Mr. Percival Netherford, and he believes with absolute certainty that every cold draft is a spectral message and every creaky board is paranormal distress. You probably won't survive this without a cup of strong tea and at least one heated hand warmer. But here we are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing our sleepy little community stretch across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge behind Mr. Netherford as he adjusts his brass monocle, which, as far as you can tell, is purely for dramatic effect. The two of you step through patches of uneven cobblestone, navigating between horse droppings and spilled gin. The smell of coal smoke clings to everything. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls midnight. Or maybe it's already 1. Netherford doesn't wear a watch because he insists that ghosts don't believe in linear time. Your shoes are soaked within the first 10 minutes, and every time you try to say something, he holds up a finger and whispers, "Did you feel that?" You didn't. Unless he means regret. Victorian London is not the quiet place you'd expect at this hour. Despite the myth of candlelit calm, the city's night is alive with clanging iron gates, alley cats yowling like banshees, and the occasional cabbie yelling something profoundly non-paranormal. But in the gaps between sound, there's a stillness, a kind of charged silence. And that's what ghost hunters live for. Historians still argue whether Victorian society truly believed in ghosts as literal entities, or if the obsession was more about collective grief and suppressed guilt. This was an era soaked in mourning rituals. People wore black for years. Post-mortem photography was a thing, and Queen Victoria herself basically ghosted the public after Albert died. As you shuffle past soot-darkened buildings, Netherford pauses outside a particularly crooked townhouse. "Right here," he whispers dramatically, "is where the widow Hawthorne claimed to hear violin music coming from her wallpaper." You nod solemnly, unsure whether to act impressed or concerned. He produces a tiny brass listening horn and presses it to the wall. After 30 seconds of silence, he sighs and says, "She was probably just lonely." Then moves on. You pass a row of bakeries whose windows glow faintly. The scent of fresh bread battles with the overwhelming aroma of damp wool. Somewhere above you, a window creaks open and shuts again, slowly, as if someone, or something, is peeking out. Netherford mutters, "Residual energy," which you suspect is his answer for everything from weather to indigestion. There's one corner where the gaslight flickers more violently than the rest. Netherford stops there every time. Tonight, he explains, he's brought a pocket compass to see if it spins wildly like it did during the Great Shiver of 1887. It does not. It doesn't move at all. He nods as if this confirms something important. The most curious part of this first hour isn't the ghosts. It's how intensely the city's infrastructure seems to resist rest. The Victorian city was noisy, even before the invention of engines. Wooden wheels clattered over stones. Night watchmen made their rounds with rattling keys. And the ghost hunters, oddly enough, added to it, clanking their little devices, scribbling into damp notebooks, and arguing about whether a slight breeze counted as paranormal activity. And yet, beneath all of it, there's a strange rhythm to the night. The fog seems to move in sync with your breathing. The light bounces off windows in slow pulses. Your heartbeat slows as your feet ache, and the absurdity of ghost hunting in a wool waistcoat gives way to quiet acceptance. One fringe belief among Victorian spiritualists claimed that the fog itself, yes, the literal mist, could act as a sort of ectoplasmic membrane, that spirits used it to travel more freely. This was mostly believed by a very small sect of candle salesmen, but still, the visual fits. Eventually, you and Netherford reach the Thames. It's black and wide and utterly indifferent to your ghostly ambitions. He stares at the water for a long time, as if waiting for something to rise from its depths. Instead, a barge passes by, creaking and muttering like an annoyed walrus. "Not tonight," he says wistfully. As you turn back toward town, you realize you're no longer stepping carefully. The fear has dulled. The chill feels almost companionable. You begin to understand why someone might dedicate their nights to this quiet, futile task. Because in between the false alarms and creaky staircases, there's a kind of stillness, a way to be in the world without needing to explain yourself to it. Netherford clears his throat and announces that he needs a break. You settle beside a lamppost, boots wet, nose cold, hands in your pockets. You try to remember how long you've been walking. 2 hours? 3? There's no rush. You're not trying to find a ghost. Not really. You're just trying not to wake up too fast. And somewhere down the street, through the fog, a window shutter creaks again. Was it wind? Was it sleep? Or something else entirely? Does it even matter? Awaiting continue. You duck into Mr. Netherford's flat just after 2 in the morning, cheeks flushed from cold, fingers tingling as they thaw. The place smells like dust, lamp oil, and a faint whiff of pickled onions, possibly paranormal, probably just leftover dinner. It's the sort of home that looks like it's been expecting a haunting for decades. Heavy drapes sag over windows. Stacks of yellowing newspapers lean like drunken soldiers against worn furniture. Somewhere under all that clutter is a chaise longue upholstered in a pattern best described as haunted floral. Netherford gestures to the dining table. It's set with a tray that holds 2 chipped teacups, a teapot that whistles from its own spout crack, and exactly 3 triangular slices of toast arranged with funereal precision. This, he informs you proudly, is the official sustenance of a Victorian ghost hunter. Tea, toast, and whatever lingering ectoplasm may or may not have been tracked in from the alley. You take your seat, grateful for the warmth. The toast crunches with all the enthusiasm of floorboards in a silent house. It's dry, barely buttered, and strangely comforting. Netherford spoons an alarming amount of sugar into his tea and mutters something about sugar energizing the third eye. You nod, because he has that look in his eye, the one that says he's about to cite 3 19th century pamphlets and possibly a seance conducted in a coal shed. Historians still debate the validity of the Victorian ghost craze. Some argue it was a genuine belief system tied to the rise of spiritualism after mass tragedies like the Crimean War and the global flu outbreaks. Others think it was mostly a social ritual, something to do on dark evenings before radio and indoor plumbing became widespread. Either way, the rituals had rules. Ghost hunters were methodical. Meals mattered. No one would attempt a midnight seance on an empty stomach. It was considered reckless, not to mention rude to the spirits, who apparently dislike low blood sugar. You sip your tea. It's weak, with a hint of cloves and maybe something medicinal. Netherford insists it's infused with sensitive herbs. You're pretty sure that means chamomile and whatever he had in the drawer labeled for calm. He offers you a biscuit shaped like a gravestone, just in case we summon anyone chatty. The walls are covered in framed etchings of famous ghost sightings, most of which look suspiciously like people in curtains. There's one drawing that features a spectral goat hovering in the background of a butcher's shop. Netherford swears it's authentic. You point out that the goat is wearing a tiny bonnet. He nods gravely. They often do. The silence that settles over the room is soft. Just the tick of a crooked grandfather clock, the occasional whistle of the kettle reheating itself on the stove, and the gentle creak of the old floorboards beneath your chairs. This is the kind of stillness people chase when they say they want to connect with the other side. But really, it's just the quiet of being still after a long, cold walk. One rarely discussed tidbit in ghost hunting manuals of the day is the importance of digestive alignment. That is, the belief that a satisfied stomach opened the mind to spirit frequencies. Some manuals even recommended specific meals. A boiled egg and a plain tea cake, unbuttered, to cleanse the palate for ectoplasmic impressions. You and Netherford don't go quite that far, But you do finish every last corner of that strange, brittle toast. And as the clock chimes softly for 2:30, you realize that your body has begun to settle. The buzz of adrenaline from traipsing foggy alleys fades, replaced by the kind of fatigue that clings gently to your shoulders like a sleep-ready shawl. He stands, stretches with an audible creak not unlike his furniture, and announces that the spirits are more likely to appear if we're in a receptive, nourished state. You nod slowly, not because you believe him exactly, but because you've run out of reasons not to. Then, with the casual formality of someone who's done this hundreds of times, he produces a small vial of clear liquid and drops a bead into his teacup. "Spirit tonic," he says, "home brewed." You politely decline. He shrugs, takes a sip, and winces. Still too much peppermint. The room grows still again. This quiet meal, this bizarre little ritual of toast and tea and lightly ghost-themed snacks, isn't just about sustenance. It's about ritual, pattern, comfort. And in a world where grief was often unspoken and sleep arrived in fragments, maybe that mattered more than the ghosts ever did. The tea's gone cold. The toast crumbs are arranged like cryptic runes on your plate, and Netherford's eyes have glazed slightly, as if he's halfway between this world and a nap. You're right there with him. He leans back, sighs, and says, "They never show up when you're waiting, but they always do when you're chewing." You let the silence stretch, and just as you start to drift, a floorboard creaks in the hallway. Neither of you move, because at this hour, in this flat, that could mean anything, or nothing at all. Either way, it's probably time for another cup of tea. Awaiting continue. Section 3. You're not entirely sure how you ended up sitting cross-legged on the floor of a parlor that smells like old violets and expired lavender oil, but here you are. It's nearly 3 in the morning, peak ghost hour, according to Netherford, and the seance is about to begin. The room is dim, lit by a dozen uneven candles, stuck into everything from antique candlesticks to an old teacup filled with salt. Shadows ripple like lazy fish across the floral wallpaper. A cat you've never seen before blinks once from the mantel and vanishes behind a stack of dusty hymnals. You shift slightly on your cushion. Something creaks ominously beneath you. Could be the floorboards. Could be something older. Across the circle, Miss Agatha Peabright, certified medium and part-time hat maker, adjusts her veil with theatrical precision. "The spirits," she announces in a hushed voice, "prefer sincerity and silence." She glares at Netherford, who's noisily unwrapping a lozenge. He offers one to you. It's licorice. You accept, because either that or have dry ghost fear mouth for the next hour. The spirit trumpet, a large, hollow cone painted with faded daisies, sits upright in the middle of the seance circle. It's supposed to amplify ghostly voices. It mostly amplifies the sound of someone's stomach gurgling. According to contemporary spiritualist guides, 3 a.m. was the veil-thinnest hour, when the material and immaterial worlds touched like awkward strangers on a crowded trolley. This belief likely arose from a mix of Christian night vigils and folk tales that emphasized the dead's discomfort with daylight. Historians still argue whether the time slot was more about atmospheric drama or just when people were too tired to be skeptical. Miss Peabright closes her eyes. The room hushes. A breeze flutters the curtains, even though the windows are shut. Somewhere in the hallway, a grandfather clock begins its slow chime. "I feel a presence," she whispers. "You feel a cramp in your left leg." Is it Uncle Bartholomew?" she asks the darkness. The trumpet wobbles slightly. Netherford gasps or hiccups. It's hard to tell. You lean forward, trying not to breathe too loud. Something clicks in the corner of the room, like a teacup settling, or a toe bone. And then, nothing. Not a whisper. Not a moan. Not even the classic chill-down-the-neck routine. Miss Peabright furrows her brow. "Perhaps the connection is tenuous tonight," Netherford offers helpfully. "Perhaps the spirits are just shy." You're tempted to add, "Or maybe they're napping," but you're pretty sure sarcasm gets you booted from the seance club. She tries again. "Spirits of the beyond, we welcome you. Share with us your truths, your wisdom, your..." Her voice trails off. "Recipes?" The trumpet falls over with a dull thunk. No one moves. Then Netherford says, "Did you hear that? You did. It was the trumpet. Falling. You all heard it." He insists it was spectral contact. You suggest it might have just been gravity. He disagrees, politely, but with the righteous conviction of someone who once mistook a coat rack for a ghost and documented it in 4 pages of handwriting. Here's the thing, they don't put it in the ghost hunting guides. Seances are long. Really long. And most of the time, very, very boring. You sit in near darkness, trying not to sneeze at the incense, while someone in lace gloves mutters vague things about a presence with the letter H who used to enjoy birds. This seance, in particular, drags like a sleepy mule. Miss Peabright makes 2 more attempts to summon specific spirits, including a sailor who was fond of potatoes and a child ghost who might have been allergic to marzipan. Neither show up. One particularly memorable moment occurs when a candle flares dramatically and Miss Peabright gasps, "A sign!" only for the flame to immediately sputter out in a puff of wax-scented disappointment. Netherford solemnly calls it symbolic of lost love. You quietly wonder if it's symbolic of bad candle wicks. Despite all this, you're deeply relaxed. There's something comforting about the routine, the shared silence, the gentle absurdity of adults whispering to furniture. You're lulled by the rhythm of the seance itself, the ebb and flow of hopeful whispers, the occasional knock that might be a ghost or just someone's knee. One spiritualist diary from 1889 notes that the dead often respond best when we cease expecting them, which sounds an awful lot like a very Victorian excuse for an unproductive evening. You glance at the window. Outside, the fog has thickened. The world is muted. Everything is soft, slow, and strangely gentle. Eventually, Miss Peabright opens her eyes and declares the seance closed. The candles are snuffed, the trumpet returned to its cushion, and the room begins to breathe again. You feel oddly well rested, despite being technically awake. As you stand, your legs wobble. Netherford claps you on the back and says, "Not every night brings a message. Sometimes, silence is the message." You nod, chewing thoughtfully on the last of your lozenge, and decide that silence, for now, is a message you're happy to receive. The seance may not have summoned the dead, but it did summon a kind of calm, an old, slow, flickering kind of calm that you'd almost forgotten existed. And maybe that's the real magic. Awaiting, continue.